Hi Super Surfers. So as you know, we're learning about fractions and we just watched our brain pop video, but let's go ahead and review some of those ideas. Our video was on parts of the whole, so I want us to talk about what a whole is. We know that a whole has that sneaky W because this is all of something. I'm going to go ahead and draw a whole. So say you get hungry and you order pizza. The pizza man brings you a whole pizza. Before you eat it, it's a whole pizza. Now, what if I want to find this on the number line? Well, I'm going to draw my number line, and I'm just going to draw a little one, because I know that I have either no pizza, so 0, or I have a whole pizza because I haven't started eating it yet. And if I want to find a whole pizza, or one whole on the number line, I find my number 1, and I put a nice closed circle to show that that's what I'm talking about. So we found it with our representation using a picture, my pizza pie way, or we found it on the number line. But let's go ahead and practice another way. Maybe this doesn't work for me. So I look at a piece of paper. It doesn't have any rips in it or tears, so it's a whole piece of construction paper. So I'm going to go ahead and write 1 on it because it's one whole piece of construction paper. I know that this is a whole. It has no parts missing. Alright, well Miss Lumpus gets hungry because you know how I am. And I decide to start eating the pizza. But I'm going to be kind and I'm going to share with a friend. And we're going to split it into 2 equal pieces because as the video reminded us, parts always have to be equal so that when you share it's fair because we don't want a friend to feel sad or left out. So I'm going to make halves. Now we see that has that F. So I make it halves with the V, and it's a silent L, so halves. I'm going to go ahead and draw this in half. So I have 2 equal pieces. I have 2 parts making up the whole. Well, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to write what those are called. So here's 1/2, and here's 1/2. But what are those numbers that Miss Lumpus made? Well, our video had some sneaky vocabulary, and they talked about numerators and denominators. I know that my neck is always above my derriere. Therefore, my numerator is always above my denominator. But let's go ahead and practice. The numerator tells the parts that you are counting or the shaded part of a fraction. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to shade in one part of this. The denominator tells us how many parts are making up the whole. So I know that in halves, we have 2 equal pieces making up the whole. I'm only counting 1 part, so my numerator is 1 because I'm counting 1 part out of the whole thing. And the whole thing has 2 pieces. Therefore, this part, or this fraction that Miss Lumpus is talking about, is half, because it's half of the whole. It's 1 out of the 2 parts. And the fraction bar just keeps them separate. I want to go ahead and find half on the number line since I know how to write it the correct way. So I go in between, and this is half. Okay, I just went right in between 0 and 1 on the number line because it's not 0 pizza and it's not a whole pizza, so I go right in the middle because I shared it with one other friend. But say that still is confusing to Miss Lumpus. So I'm going to use my paper way again. I'm going to fold it in half, make those 2 equal pieces. See, 2 equal pieces, and I'm going to correctly identify them with my numerator and my denominator. So we have 2 halves make up the whole. Now I want to compare and make sure that I'm not losing out any pizza to my friend. So here's the whole pizza, and here it is once we cut it in half. I don't see any paper overlapping, so I know that 2 halves are really 2 equal pieces and they make up 1 whole pizza. So now we're going to learn about thirds. As you can see, I drew 3 equal pieces because thirds are for fractions that have 3 equal parts. So if I know that 3 parts make up the whole, I'm going to go ahead and fill in my denominator, 3, because that's the number that makes up the whole pizza. And I'm going to correctly write each fraction. I'm going to talk about each piece one at a time. So this one piece is going to be 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3. As you can see, 1, 2, 3 parts make up the whole. Now I'm going to shade in the piece that I get. So if I shade in this piece, that's 1 out of the whole thing. So Miss Lempes gets 1 piece out of 3. I get 1/3. Finding it on my number line, I want to count and split it up into 3 parts. So here's 1 part, 2 parts, and 3 parts. Miss Lempes is going to get 1/3, so I'm going to shade a nice closed circle on 1/3 on my number line. The piece of paper way is a little tricky, so I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to fold it into 3 equal rectangles. Like an accordion. And I see that I have 3 equal parts, so I'm going to correctly write their fraction names on there, remembering my numerator, my denominator, and of course my fraction bar that keeps them separate. And I have 3 equal pieces. If I grab my halves and my whole to compare again, I'm going to go ahead, line them up nicely. Here's my whole. Here are my thirds. Once again, I don't see any pieces of paper showing through. I know that 3 parts make up the whole. So now I want to go ahead and I want to learn about fourths. And fourths, like it kind of sounds, is going to have 4 equal pieces. And I wrote it down and I put a TH because fractions are kind of funny and they have that sound on a lot of the fraction endings. So fourths means I'm going to have 4 equal pieces. So I'm going to draw this. That means that 4 people are going to eat this pizza. Alright, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces. I know that 4 parts are making up the whole. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to write my denominator because I know that there are always going to be 4 parts making up this whole. I don't even need to count anymore if I know to look at my denominator. I'm going to go ahead and correctly identify all 4 pieces by writing our fraction. Since this is 1 part of the whole thing, I know that the numerator for this piece is going to be 1/4, so I'm only counting that piece. Well, this time I'm only going to count this piece, so this is going to be 1/4, this is going to be 1/4, and this is going to be 1/4. Now, when you count the denominator, remember we're counting either the shaded section or the part of the whole that we're talking about for the fraction. So, if I shade this piece, maybe this is the piece that Miss Lempes gets, I know I get 1 piece out of all 4, so my numerator is going to be 1, and my denominator is going to be 4. Therefore, my whole fraction altogether is 1/4, 1/4. Now I have my number line, and I want to go ahead and draw it correctly. I know it's not no pizza, it's not 0, and it's not a whole pizza. So I need to find the 4 pieces. This is 1 out of 4 pieces, so I'm going to put a closed circle on this, and I'm going to write 1/4 because it's 1 out of the 4 pieces. It's 1 part of the whole. So now I'm going to take a piece of paper to again find my 4 equal parts if that way isn't working for me. I'm going to fold my piece of construction paper into half. And then since I want to find fourths, I'm going to fold it in half again so that when I unfold it, ta-da, I have 4 equal pieces. I'm going to go ahead and remember to correctly identify using my numerator as my top number, my denominator as my bottom number, and that fraction bar to keep the neck and the derriere separate. Okay, so now I have fourths. I'm going to grab my whole and my other stacks of construction paper, line them up nicely to make sure I don't see any other pieces of paper. Here's my whole. Here are my fourths. I don't see any paper showing through, so I know that fourths is really 4 equal parts that make up a whole. Okay, so let's go ahead and review. We learned that the numerator is on top always, and it talks about the number of parts or the shaded area of a fraction. The denominator is always on the bottom, and it's the number of parts that make up a whole. So it's how many pieces you have all together. We talked about the whole, how I haven't eaten any pizza yet, so it's all together. Still, it's one whole. Halves are when you share with one friend, so 2 parts make up halves. Thirds are when 3 parts make up the whole, and fourths are when 4 parts make up the whole. And we always write our parts of the whole as the denominator down low, and the number that we're counting, the part that we're counting, or the shaded part, is the numerator. I want you to go ahead and copy this down and write down any questions that you may have and bring it to class tomorrow so you can remember our important vocabulary and the pictures that go with it too.